a single Star Citizen developer just revealed how one leaked screenshot destroyed months of flight model testing and burned an entire batch of trusted players forever. What happened next exposes a fundamental problem that's been sabotaging Star Citizen's development for over a decade, and the consequences are spreading faster than anyone realizes. Most players have no idea how these leaks are actually setting back the features they're desperately waiting for, but the evidence is right there in the developer Discord messages that are tearing the community apart. You've probably been following Star Citizen leaks for years, watching how the community reacts to every data mine, every Evocati build, every whisper from the development pipeline. But this situation with Yogi and the flight model testing cuts deeper than the usual leak drama. You might have thought leaks were just part of the process, inevitable, maybe even helpful for getting community feedback early. That's exactly what most of us believed until we started seeing the real consequences play out in developer burnout and canceled features. If you're someone who genuinely wants Star Citizen to deliver on its promises instead of getting stuck in endless revision cycles, this leak controversy reveals the hidden mechanism that's been sabotaging progress for years. The rabbit hole goes much deeper than a simple NDA violation. CIG assembled specialized focus groups to test flight model changes in complete secrecy. Think of it like medical drug trials. They needed unbiased first impressions from different player types without any outside influence contaminating the results. These weren't random players either. CIG used algorithms to select specific participants based on their gameplay patterns, ship preferences, and behavioral data. Some were dedicated dogfighters who lived in Arena Commander. Others were haulers who spent hundreds of hours running cargo routes between Crusader and ArcCorp. Mining specialists who could feel the difference between a prospector and a mole in their sleep. Within 3 hours of the test beginning, someone violated their NDA and leaked the details to Pipeline Discord. The leaked information spread across Reddit, Spectrum, and YouTube channels faster than a Carrack can quantum jump to Microtech. Now that entire testing group is permanently burned, and Yogi's team has lost their ability to conduct this type of research for the foreseeable future. But the community is missing something crucial in all the drama. This wasn't about keeping secrets for the sake of corporate control or building hype around the next patch. This was about generating clean scientific data that could actually improve the systems we complain about most. The problem runs deeper than individual bad actors breaking agreements. We've created a culture where leaking NDA content generates social media engagement and community status, but the real cost gets hidden in delayed features and abandoned experiments. Most players assume more transparency automatically equals better development, but the evidence from this incident suggests we might have that completely backwards. When you examine how other successful game studios handle similar challenges, the pattern becomes clear. Riot Games, Blizzard, and even smaller studios like Hello Games maintain strict confidentiality during experimental phases, specifically because premature exposure kills innovation. You know that feeling when you're trying to perfect a recipe in your kitchen and someone keeps walking in, tasting it half-finished, and giving you feedback before you've even added the final ingredients? That's exactly what happened to Yogi's team, except instead of one person, it was thousands of community members forming opinions based on incomplete information. The psychological contamination effect that leaks have on development decisions goes beyond simple bias. When you're testing something as fundamental as flight mechanics, you need what researchers call naive participants, people experiencing the changes with fresh eyes and no preconceptions. Yogi explicitly stated that this leak weakens his position to do experimental testing in the future. That's not developer ego talking. That's a technical constraint that affects every future iteration of the systems you actually want to see improved. Consider how this actually works in practice. The leaked flight model information mentioned something called egg-shaped velocity envelopes and changes to how ships handle acceleration curves. If you've already read community reactions calling these changes terrible or game-breaking, watched YouTube videos breaking down why the math doesn't work, or absorbed opinions from Spectrum threads before you touch the new flight model, your feedback becomes scientifically worthless. You're no longer measuring your authentic experience with the mechanics. You're measuring your response to other people's interpretations of incomplete information. It's like asking someone to review a restaurant after they've already read dozens of negative Yelp reviews and watched TikTok videos of people complaining about the food. The bias becomes baked into every response, making the data completely unreliable for making design decisions. This explains why CIG has struggled for years to nail down flight mechanics that satisfy the community. Every time they attempt proper scientific testing, leaks poison the data pool before clean feedback can be collected. The Master Modes controversy provides a perfect example. Most of the initial backlash came from players who had never actually flown with the system, but had formed opinions based on leaked specifications and community outrage cycles that built momentum before anyone could test the actual implementation. The ripple effects extend far beyond just flight mechanics. When developers lose confidence in their ability to test experimental features safely, they default to safer, more conservative design choices. Innovation dies not because of technical limitations, but because the social environment makes experimentation too risky. You end up with incremental tweaks instead of the bold mechanical improvements that could actually solve long-standing problems. Think about your own experience with Star Citizen updates over the years. How many times have you walked into a new patch with opinions already formed from Reddit discussions, content creator reactions, or org chat speculation? Remember that time you were absolutely convinced you'd hate the new quantum travel changes based on leaked patch notes, but then found yourself actually enjoying the improved interdiction mechanics once you experienced them firsthand? Or the opposite scenario, when leaked information made engineering gameplay sound revolutionary, but the actual implementation felt disappointing because reality couldn't match the hype built around incomplete details and community speculation. That gap between expectation and reality often has nothing to do with the quality of the actual feature and everything to do with how leaked information gets processed through the community telephone game. You know what's funny about all this? You're watching a video about Star Citizen leaks, which means you're probably the exact type of person who seeks out this kind of information. And if you're enjoying this deep dive into the psychology behind development processes, you might want to hit that subscribe button, because apparently, understanding why games take forever to make is more entertaining than actually playing them sometimes. Plus, subscribing is free, unlike that Polaris you've been eyeing in the Pledge store. The community keeps demanding open development without understanding what that actually means in practice. Real transparency isn't about knowing every internal detail as it happens. It's about having meaningful input on decisions that affect the final product. When someone leaked these flight model specifications, they didn't give us better transparency. They sabotaged the scientific process that could have delivered superior flight mechanics. Open development, as Chris Roberts originally envisioned it, meant showing the community the journey of game creation, including the messy experimental phases. But it was never supposed to mean that every internal test, every prototype, every half-finished system would be immediately public knowledge. The difference is crucial. Showing your work doesn't mean broadcasting every rough draft before it's ready for feedback. This pattern keeps repeating across different systems with increasingly severe consequences. The Reclaimer flat texture leak that killed Evocati's ship testing access? That wasn't just about one ugly texture, it revealed unfinished lighting systems, incomplete material shaders, and placeholder geometry that gave players completely wrong impressions about the ship's final quality. The engineering gameplay details that got leaked and criticized before the underlying systems were even functional. Those leaks created community expectations that were impossible to meet because they were based on early prototypes, not finished features. These aren't isolated incidents of community enthusiasm gone wrong. They represent a systematic problem where leaks create premature community reactions that force CIG to make design decisions based on incomplete information rather than thorough testing data. The pressure to respond to community backlash over leaked content often derails development timelines more than any technical challenge. You've probably noticed how different your initial reaction to new mechanics often is, compared to your opinion after extended playtime. Remember when the mining laser efficiency changes hit PTU last year? The immediate community response was overwhelmingly negative. Players complained about reduced range, slower scanning, disrupted mining routes that had been profitable for months. Content creators made videos about how CIG was ruining mining and forcing players to adapt to inferior mechanics. But after a few weeks of adaptation, many of those same players admitted the changes actually solved long-standing balance issues and made mining more engaging. The reduced laser range forced more strategic positioning. The slower scanning encouraged exploration of new asteroid fields instead of farming the same profitable spots repeatedly. The mechanics that seemed punitive in isolation actually created more interesting gameplay loops when experienced as part of the complete system. The problem is that leaks capture and amplify those initial negative reactions before players have time to understand the design intent or adapt their approaches. If someone had leaked those mining changes during internal testing, the community backlash might have killed improvements that ultimately enhanced the gameplay experience. The developers would have seen the negative feedback, assumed the changes were fundamentally flawed, and reverted to the old system that everyone had been complaining about for months. This dynamic becomes especially dangerous as Star Citizen approaches critical development milestones. Server meshing technology, which could finally enable the persistent universe experience we've been promised, requires extensive testing of network architecture that most players don't understand. If internal server meshing tests get leaked and players start complaining about technical limitations they don't comprehend, it could derail years of back-end development work. Engineering gameplay represents another vulnerable system. The leaked information about fuse boxes, component failures, and repair mechanics generated massive community debates about complexity versus accessibility. But those debates were based on incomplete information about how the systems would actually function in practice. Players formed strong opinions about mechanics they'd never experienced, creating community pressure that could force design compromises before proper testing determines what actually works. Capital ship mechanics face similar risks. The Polaris, Idris, and other large ships require extensive testing of multi-crew gameplay, but any leaks about their capabilities or limitations could create community expectations that constrain design decisions. If internal tests reveal that capital ships need significant balancing adjustments, leaked information about those tests could generate backlash that prevents necessary changes. The solution requires fundamental changes from both CIG and the community, but the technical aspects are more complex than most players realize. On the development side, they need to implement canary trap techniques, giving each tester slightly different specifications so leaks can be traced back to specific individuals. This isn't just about changing numbers and tooltips. It requires sophisticated systems that can track which version of information each player received, correlate that with leaked content, and identify the source with mathematical certainty. Modern game studios use advanced telemetry systems for this purpose. Every action a tester takes gets logged with timestamps, hardware fingerprints, and behavioral patterns that create unique digital signatures. If someone leaks information, the studio can analyze the leaked content against their database and identify not just who had access to that information, but when they accessed it and what other systems they interacted with during the testing session. For players who want access to experimental testing, there should be formal consequences for NDA violations that go beyond simple account restrictions. Legal action remains an option, but it's expensive and time-consuming. More effective would be permanent exclusion from all future testing programs, including PTU access, Evocati participation, and any special events or previews. The social cost of being permanently cut off from early access would deter most potential leakers more effectively than legal threats. But the bigger change needs to come from how the community consumes and spreads leaked information. Content creators and community leaders need to stop treating NDA violations as legitimate news sources. The engagement metrics from covering leaked content might provide short-term benefits, but they contribute to long-term damage that ultimately hurts everyone who wants to see Star Citizen succeed. When Pipeline Discord or Reddit posts confidential testing details, the responsible response is to ignore and discourage that content, not amplify it for views and clicks. This requires a cultural shift that goes against natural human curiosity and the social media economy that rewards sensational content over responsible journalism. You've seen how the Star Citizen community prides itself on being more invested and knowledgeable than typical gaming communities. We understand complex mechanics, follow development progress closely, and care deeply about the project's long-term success. We can explain the difference between quantum drives and jump drives, debate the merits of different shield generators, and theory-craft fleet compositions for scenarios that don't even exist yet. But when it comes to leaks, we're acting like every other impatient gaming community that prioritizes instant gratification over sustainable development practices. The irony is obvious once you see it clearly. Everyone wants the flight model fixed, server performance improved, and gameplay systems polished. But we keep disrupting the scientific processes that could actually deliver those improvements. It's like complaining that your favorite restaurant's food quality is inconsistent while simultaneously sneaking into their kitchen and disrupting the chefs during recipe development. Then wondering why the menu keeps changing and nothing ever seems to get perfected. The economic incentives make this problem worse. Content creators need regular material to maintain their audiences, and leaked information provides easy content that generates engagement. Community websites need traffic to survive, and exclusive leaks drive clicks more effectively than official announcements that everyone covers simultaneously. The entire ecosystem around Star Citizen content creation has become dependent on a steady stream of unofficial information that undermines the development process it claims to support. Breaking this cycle requires recognizing that supporting Star Citizen's development means being the kind of community that makes developers want to collaborate with us rather than work around us. Every leaked NDA pushes CIG further behind closed doors and makes the open development we claim to value increasingly impossible to sustain. What you can do differently moving forward starts with understanding the real impact of your choices. If you ever receive an invitation to NDA testing, treat it as the genuine privilege it represents. Honor the confidentiality agreement completely. Don't share details with org mates, close friends, or anyone else in the community. The temporary social currency you might gain from sharing insider information isn't worth the permanent damage to development processes that could benefit everyone. When you encounter leaked content online, resist the psychological urge to form strong opinions based on incomplete information. Wait for official releases or public testing phases where you can actually experience the mechanics firsthand. Your gut reactions to leaked specifications are almost certainly wrong because they lack the context and nuance that only comes from actual gameplay experience. If you create content or hold leadership positions in the community, establish clear policies against covering NDA violations. The short-term engagement boost from leak coverage isn't worth the long-term damage to the development processes that could deliver the features your audience actually wants. Instead, focus on analyzing officially released information, providing gameplay guides for existing systems, and creating content that adds value without undermining development. Rather than demanding access to confidential testing, advocate for more structured public experimentation. CIG could expand Arena Commander testing programs with rotating experimental modes that let players experience proposed changes without revealing sensitive development information. They could run more frequent PTU phases focused on specific mechanics, with clear communication about what's being tested and why. They could create formal community feedback sessions that don't require NDAS, but still generate useful data through structured surveys and gameplay metrics. The three critical points that emerge from this analysis are: leaks contaminate scientific testing data and directly slow down development progress in measurable ways. Our community leak culture is actively preventing the mechanical improvements we claim to want, while creating economic incentives that perpetuate the problem. And we can fix this by respecting confidentiality agreements, while demanding better public testing alternatives that serve everyone's interests. Your experience with leaked Star Citizen content over the years probably follows a predictable pattern. You read leaked specifications, form immediate opinions based on incomplete information, engage in community discussions that reinforce those opinions, and then feel surprised when the actual implementation differs from your expectations. The gap between leaked information and lived gameplay experience reveals exactly why these NDAS matter more than most players realize. The path forward requires recognizing that the instant gratification of leaked information comes at the cost of long-term development progress. Every time we choose to consume and spread confidential testing details, we're trading the possibility of better gameplay systems for the temporary satisfaction of knowing something before we're supposed to know it. That's not a trade that benefits anyone who actually wants to see Star Citizen reach its potential.